Well, Rania, we've got a little bit before our next guest. I mean, really, I'm very thankful to Kevin. I wouldn't even have known this was happening if I didn't follow him on Twitter. But maybe a
Right.
little levity in order here before we turn to some of our other
Yeah.
topics. I mean, one thing that you had pointed out to me from the New York Times is this
Just like already
Havana
laughing. Okay.
Syndrome issue. Every time you think it's gone, it just like rears its ugly head. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, now they're like re-investigating Havana Syndrome?
Yeah. So the crazy thing about this story is you have Biden's top aides and intelligence officials holding meetings about something that doesn't exist. And they even say this is like the opening sentence for the New York Times article covering this. It was in the news a few days ago. It says President Biden's top aides were told that experts studying the mysterious illnesses affecting scores of diplomats, spies, and their family members were still struggling to find evidence to back up the leading theory that microwave attacks are being launched by Russian agents. And then it goes on to say that the head of the CIA literally held a meeting with the Joint Intelligence Community Council, and as well as Avril Haines, who's the director of national intelligence. So you have America's top intelligence officials holding meetings about something that doesn't exist. And literally, like there was a peer-reviewed study into this.
The
and
FBI.
Intelligence. They're like, we can't find what's giving these people headaches. And there's this crazy theory about it's some sort of microwave technology that apparently not only the Russians, but they have no evidence, but they're like saying maybe it's the Russians, maybe it's the Iranians, maybe it's the Chinese. So you want me to believe that this microwave technology that the most powerful country on earth not only doesn't have, but can't seem to find evidence it exists, has been developed by Iran, which is struggling under the pressure of insane, crippling sanctions, and where somebody in Iran dies every 2 minutes right now from COVID because of how horrible the COVID situation is in that country, a lot of which is to do with U.S. sanctions stifling their ability to get the medical stuff that they need to deal with COVID. But this country that's struggling and is impoverished under sanctions has somehow managed to create this magic technology, okay?
The world's greatest weapon in history.
The world, and I mean, America is like the center of weapons technology. Like, you have all of the leading weapons companies in America and also and scientists around the world can't figure it out. This is unbelievable. That, I mean, you know what, American intelligence officials, go ahead, keep wasting your time investigating the magic psychic microwave techhonestly that's giving everyone headaches. At this point, I mean, maybe next time I get a headache, Havana Syndrome,
I honestly think we should start blaming every illness we have on Havana Syndrome. I mean, it might as well be true. So I saw someone tweet something because they put, I guess, William Burns, the guy who is in charge of looking for bin Laden in front of it. And they were just like, well, I mean, so that took 10 years and it turned out he was hiding in one of the main cities of one of your top allies. So how is this guy going to find anything out? But it really is just the FBI went to Cuba and they were like, okay, we're going to go investigate. They were like, they let us investigate the whole thing. And we have no evidence that this is even real. Forget that what made it happen, that it even is real. I mean, I don't want to doubt that people are reporting these symptoms, but I mean, there's actually no evidence that anything has really happened. And I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's an elaborate hoax of people to. I don't want to call anyone a liar with their medical information. I don't know. I don't need them to release it. I know HIPAA violations and all that. That's all the rage in the NFL about COVID. But it just seems so ridiculous that even your own intelligence people were like, yeah, this is probably fake. There, as you said, there was a peer review article. Cuba has actually continued to investigate this, which just shows you how ridiculous U.S. sanctions are, that they wanted, since they definitely don't want to be blamed for this, they're doing a full scale investigation. They put something out last week that was listen, this just is just not true. There's no way it can happen. But then, of course, as you also pointed out to us, Rania, you have people that at the Olympics blaming the Simone Biles withdrawal on Havana Syndrome.
Yeah, they're like projecting it on. She didn't even say she had the symptoms of Havana syndrome. Right. But I have to say, Eugene, I'm gonna have to cut this live stream short because I've suddenly got this really strange, headache. I think it's Havana syndrome. Like I'm gonna start calling out of work
Russian
for this. With this
just under your window with some little gun type thing. I feel like there's a new James Bond coming out in October, and I feel like this is going to be the plot. Is like what is Havana syndrome? It's at that level of like James Bond movie ridiculous.
I need to be let out the booth.
Another victim of Havana syndrome.
The microwaves.
Microwaves. Like what?
It's hard. It's truly hard to understand.
I also remember there was like one peer-reviewed.
It's going to cost them money.
Yeah. There was also one peer-reviewed article a couple years ago, I think, that actually said it might be crickets, like the sound of crickets, given the time of year that it's happening. Like it's like that. It's to the point where like you've got scientists like really trying to understand what's happening, and they can't come up with anything because it's magic. It's like a fantasy. Yeah. It's an illusion. There's no other explanation.
This is somebody's
why
excuse.
Would they do it?
This is somebody's excuse not to go into where gone too far.
They just want to. What kind of weapon? Like what kind of weapon? Could you imagine investing in a weapon that just gives people slight discomfort?
I mean, it's almost genius.
Like, what does it even accomplish?
We just want to give them slight discomfort. We don't really want anyone to be debilitated. I still want them to be able to go about their day, but I just want them to be just a little annoyed.
Like, without an Advil. Like, I don't want them to just go about their day without having to take Motrin, right?
Is it possible that Advil created the Havana syndrome? That this is actually
more headaches, more money.
Ruse.
Big headache.
We got to the bottom of it. I think we just uncovered what's actually happening here.
I mean, there's just also just like these causation issues that you just think like of all countries. Why on earth would Cuba launch some bizarre microwave attack? I mean, they're under one of the most crippling blockades of all time. And they'd be like, yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to do something that doesn't even really affect people that bad. Although I guess, I don't know. I did read that like 2 or 3 of them were like emotionally scarred or something like that. Or one of them like couldn't walk.
I mean, I'm
emotionally
scarred.
It's bad. I don't know. Maybe I should make fun of it. But it just seems completely ridiculous to me. The whole thing from beginning to end. I mean, what can you do, really? I mean, but the fact that it's in the New York Times, the fact that they're meeting about it, like it honestly, what it really does show is, to me, the level of commitment the Biden administration has taken on since the incidents in Cuba to try to demonize Cuba. Like Havana syndrome was basically gone. And now all of a sudden, when Biden is like tightening the screws of the blockade, now everyone is being told, you got to promote Havana syndrome. We got to do something about Havana syndrome. They had given up on it, and now they're bringing it back. And it just shows they'll go to any length to demonize the Cuban government and, by extension, Russia, Iran, China. But, of course, they just all lump them in together because there's always some Russian, Cuban, Chinese, Venezuelan plot to steal the American elections or whatever by bidding in voting machines and ballots from China.
Yeah, by the ghost of Hugo Chavez, right? The other thing too
Dominion
is like
is actually now suing, by the way, for they're suing Fox and these other right-wing channels for claiming that their voting machines are from Venezuela. Although Venezuela, to be fair, does have like very good elections and actually really good voting machines. So in a way, they have like biometric imaging to vote in Venezuela. It's actually extremely hard to cheat to vote in Venezuela. You got to have your ID.
That's with the microwaves.
Check your ID. Then they have like a biometric imaging thing. Then you go vote. There's like a paper printout that like they give to you to like prove that it's the right vote. They actually go to great lengths to avoid voter fraud. So in a way, if Dominion was bringing the voting machines from Venezuela, there would be some logic to that, actually. But the voting machines in Venezuela are actually made by a company called Smartmatic. So,
I think, I really believe that to some degree, like being able to say Havana syndrome is like the acceptable version of the Wuhan virus. Like liberals can say Havana syndrome and there's no repercussions societally, whereas for liberals Wuhan virus is like explicitly racist and they decided it's bad because Trump said it, which it is. But Havana syndrome is still open to both sides of the aisle to say without any ostracization.
No, I agree. And realistically, I mean, if Biden had said Wuhan virus, people would be saying that. I mean, it just like there is such you know, I don't even really know. It's just like when you see polling on like the same issue when a Republican's in, all the Democrats are against it. When they're, or a good example, like when the war in Yugoslavia happened during Bill Clinton's reign, where the Republicans were all like anti-war, and of course George Bush ran in 2000 on saying I'm not a nation builder, and then like the very first thing he did was start a bunch of wars, and then the Democrats were anti-war, and then it always just like flip flops. But it is interesting to know like how propaganda works, because you do see like they do these polls. I've seen them on like different healthcare and stuff like that. Well, they'll just ask people, do you support this thing? And they're like, yeah, I support that thing. Then they'd be like, this is a Democratic policy. And then like 20% fewer people will support it. It's like, oh, well, I hate Democrats. Yeah. And it's just wild how propaganda works.
Well, also, I'm just reminded of like, one of the reasons that Donald Trump was able to like get so popular during the Republican primary is he kind of like called some of that out, where he was talking to Jeb Bush. Like, do you remember that exchange between Donald Trump and Jeb Bush?
I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah, because it was so like unprecedented. Yeah.
Yep.
And for those who don't remember, for those who don't remember, it was like Jeb Bush was saying something that was like unimportant and didn't really matter. And then like Donald Trump interrupted him with like, your brother lied about weapons of mass destruction and made us go to war with Iraq over a lie. And like, he said it in a way that I can't even repeat because it was just such a good burn.
And then Jeb Bush said, he was like, well, he kept us safe. He kept us safe for all this time or whatever, justifying the war in Iraq. And Donald Trump breaks in and goes, not on 9/11. He didn't. Not on 9/11. And he said so many things. And then people were like booing him. And he goes, I don't care. Those are all just Jeb's donors. They all paid to be here. These are all just Jeb's donors. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was 100% true. You can see it on YouTube. It's the second Republican debate. And Trump is just laying waste to people. And I believe that was also the debate where Marco Rubio decided he was going to try to like stand up to Trump. And there was that like also that weird, that might've been the third debate, but there was that weird like domino effect that each debate, a different Republican would be like, I'm going to stand up to Donald Trump. And they would just tank in the polls immediately afterwards. The only one who hung on till the end was Ted Cruz. And then of course, Donald Trump brought out the issue about Ted Cruz's father and the Kennedy assassination. I mean, the things that he said were amazing. I mean, it was like a National Enquirer type thing.
He's a smarter guy than people give him credit for, the sense that he's able to tap into he was able to tap into like the kind of feeling that people had, this like anger at the system feeling that people had. But then the reason you made me think of that is because you were like, and then they get into office. So remember Trump campaigned on all these things. Like, obviously he didn't mean anything he said, but then he came into office and he dropped the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan. And like, almost like he ended up doing crazy things with Iran. Like, I think if he had gotten a second term, we probably would have had an actual war with Iran of like, bombing the country.
Of all bombs, it's so powerful that it sucks all the oxygen out of the area of like its blast radius. So even if somehow you survive the blast, you would just suffocate to death because it's whatever, I forget the exact mechanism. But yeah, it's considered to be the one, like basically one step below a nuclear weapon, like the most damage you can possibly do without launching a nuclear weapon. Now, of course, it's far, far, far less destructive than a nuclear weapon, but it just gives you a sense of the mentality of like having something like that you're really thinking like, okay, what is the maximum amount of damage I can do to someone without a nuclear weapon? And like, that's going to be the mother of all bombs, which is wild. And it's almost never used because these they're so destructive. They're honestly counterproductive in terms of their use and the impact of it, which is why the only time they really used it was in the middle of nowhere against some so-called Taliban training camp. But yeah, I mean, it really, Trump, wow. And he could be back again in 2024, raising huge amounts of money right now.
I'm thinking it's probably like, I actually fear we're going to have like a President Nikki Haley or something crazy like that.
Well, that would be the worst case scenario.
If we do, she's like, Nikki Haley is just, man, she's scary. Like, she would definitely go to war with Iran and who knows where else. Like, Nikki Haley is just like this.
Unbelievable. You got Kristi Noem, the governor of North Dakota, who basically just did nothing for COVID-19. And I remember when the vaccines were being rolled out, I read this article, I think it was in the New York Times, and the scientist was saying, yeah, you know, in states like North Dakota, it's actually already too late because so many people have had coronavirus at this point that by the time you just logistically rolled out the vaccines, like it will have burned out because it will have just burned through everyone who could get it in the population and given herd immunity. So they basically just did absolutely nothing, but she is potentially running. You got Ron DeSantis, also, you know, no mask mandate. Also, by the way, the red tide in the Gulf Coast, that's his fault. He's actually number 2 in most polls of Republicans after Trump of who they would want is Ron DeSantis. Yes.
What's wrong with people?
You know, but again,
I'm
good
not
at
there,
PR.
man.
You know,
You're in America. You're in America.
Well, you know, I wish we had our good friend Sean Blackman on to explain the politics of Florida, but just really, you just look at the like rogues gallery of people who are there.